Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming on this very early Saturday morning. My name is Mindy McAdams. I am the Executive Director of the Fairfield Area Chamber of Commerce, and I'm honored to serve as the moderator again today. This forum provides an excellent opportunity to hear directly from our legislators about their priorities and their plans for our future. First, I'd like to express our gratitude to our sponsors, which is the reason that we can have these events and it can be free and open to the public. Freeman Cavanides Law Firm, Morrissey Law, Sierra Club, and Jefferson County Farmers and Neighbors for their support in making this open to the public. We'd also like to thank Jason Strong from Fairfield Media Center for recording today. We are not live streaming. We're testing out the new location and some things, but it will be recorded and available for after this on the Fairfield Media Center YouTube page, and we will share that out on all of our socials and in the newsletters. This morning, the legislators will give an update, and then we will be reading questions that were submitted. If you've not submitted a question, please do so at the back of the room and have those written down. We, of course, have more questions than we could even possibly ever get through, so we're going to try to do it as fairly as possible and keep the topics varied. So if there are numerous questions about the same topic, we will probably just pick one of those. Please remember to be respectful of everyone in the room. Politics can make us all very passionate, so we are hoping that we can all behave. Please no cheers, shouting, or comments from the audience. We are shortened today. We will end 8:45-ish, 8:40-ish. Jeff and Adrian need to get to another forum immediately following. We will be back here on March 21st with a not shortened program, but we will still continue with the moderator-read questions, so you can submit those in advance for next time. So, without further ado, we will let them give you their update. Representative Helena, would you like to go first, ma'am?
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me okay? Because I'm used to having the microphone, at our other location. So what a fantastic turnout, a fantastic location. Thank you for the media recording this and everything. I'm very pleased, very pleased. I look forward to answering your questions. And, I'm Helena Hayes. Most of you look familiar. I represent District 88 in the Iowa House. Jeff and I share Jefferson County here. And so I have Mahaska, all of Keokuk County, and just the northern parts of Jefferson County in my district. So this is my 4th year. While I'm up there in the House, I'm serving currently on the Education Committee, so I'm talking a lot about the bills in our education system. I'm serving on the Veterans Committee, which I absolutely love. I'm the daughter and granddaughter of a veteran, and now currently the mother of my son who is down at basic training at Fort Benning right now in the Army National Guard. I also serve on Workforce and Development, which we have not had a whole lot of bills go through this year. It's been a pretty quiet committee. And personally, I love this job. I love working with people. I love to hear your concerns. And so I welcome your questions today. And I do want to just mention that a forum like this is a great time for you to ask us questions, but truly reach out to us outside of this little tiny window, because a lot of these issues are not going to be handled by 60-second sound bites. And so I want to work with you, and so do they. And so make sure that you're contacting us outside of this window and that we have conversations. So that's my introduction. You next.
All right, thank you, Representative Hayes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to our hosts and our sponsors and all of you for being here. I guess just first, again, very thankful to serve in this position. Also, thank God for this beautiful day, for our blessings of peace and prosperity, and for the blessings of self-government, which is critical that each and every one of you are showing up and taking part. I hope it goes without saying by now that our state, our nation, locally, we're facing a lot of unprecedented challenges. Whether it's the Epstein files or the military buildup in the Middle East, questions surrounding farm chemicals and pesticides, illness, and a whole host of other issues. These are challenges we've never faced before. And so it is really essential that as many voices are taking the responsibility to be here to participate, to chart our destiny, and hopefully, again, preserve those blessings. I serve on the Education Committee, Higher Education Committee, Judiciary, Government Oversight, and I recently became the chair of the International Relations Committee. Couple quick projects. Probably the most important thing that I feel we've moved forward so far is I think what's going to be called the Ed Tech Bill. Ed Tech is a term that essentially means to student-facing internet-connected devices. And what the bill essentially does is would restrict screen time in grades K through 5 to 60 minutes a day with carve-out. So we're really talking about a kid kind of being, or a child being glued to an iPad or a tablet. We're not necessarily talking about like a slideshow or using a television or something like that. So the proposal moved through committee with a lot of bipartisan support. There was a little bit of bipartisan opposition as well, which is really interesting. But it really did kind of cut across some of the political divides we've been seeing. And basically what happened is various members read the same book in the interim. So there's been a lot of literature published recently outlining that our children, and I take no joy, you know, this is very painful to say, our children are less cognitively capable now than they have been in the past. Some people have identified this trend starting around the year 2000, but really accelerating in recent years. So it's frankly a pretty alarming trend that the legislature and school districts and parents and citizens need to take extraordinarily seriously, and thankfully we had that discussion moving forward. One thing that I wasn't so thrilled with is we did have a proposal to really beef up the community college system and have community colleges offer a 4-year baccalaureate programs to really increase access to higher education, especially affordable higher education that's local to home and geared towards workforce needs. Unfortunately, the private colleges really hacked that proposal down, so it's been reined in quite a bit, which was sad because the idea came from Indian Hills, and they actually got carved out of the proposal that moved forward. So that was sad to see. There also has been updates on pesticides. I know that's a topic important to a lot of people. The federal government had an announcement this week, so a lot's changed even within the last 72 hours on that. And again, a lot of other really important discussions. So looking forward to your questions. And again, as Representative Helena Hayes, we're always available, and we're very thankful for your participation in this process. It is essential.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name's Adrian Dickey. I live in Packwood, lived there my entire life. This is my 6th year now in the Iowa Senate. I'm an assistant leader in the Senate, chairman of the Workforce Committee, also on Ways and Means, Judiciary, Transportation, Commerce, Rules Administration, and vice chair of Economic Development. So, you know, if there's bills through the Senate and those committees, please feel free to ask on that. I am not on any of the committees, and the reason why I bring this up is it's kind of, we got a nice variety here with, even though the House and Senate, but I'm not on any ag or DNR related committees. I'm not on any HHS or education related committees as they are. So it's kind of a little different mix. That's one thing that when we get assigned committees, often you're assigned stuff with a little bit in your background, which is kind of nice. So you have a little bit of experience. So, so anyway, happy to be here and look forward to hearing your questions.
Okay. So as always, we will start with sponsor questions. So this, excuse me. In regard to HSB 657, which has to do with impaired water, this bill appears to reduce the reporting of impaired waterways without reducing the actual impairment. How does this serve the safety of health of Iowans? And will you refuse to support this bill if it moves forward? And just so you know, if you have a big bunch of words ahead of your question, I'm going to summarize that and ask the question.
Well, I'll go first because, so a little background. She mentioned it was an HSB, which is a House study bill, or an HF would be a House file. Senate bills would be an SF, Senate file, or SSB, Senate study bill. So we just got done with the first funnel. Some of you have heard about that. What that first funnel is this. Essentially, when we start session, anybody can have, that's in the Capitol, there's 151 of us, 100 reps, 50 senators, and a governor. Any one of those people can introduce as many ideas, as many bills as they want. I think I saw some House members had over 50. It's a lot of ideas. But you draft them, you put them on a piece of paper, and they get assigned to a committee that bill corresponds to, and it goes through a process as whether that committee thinks that bill's worthy of moving on in the process, and it's a very, very, very lengthy process. Okay, this week was the first funnel, which means all those ideas have to at least get through a committee to stay alive, and it's a way of taking this massive amount of bills. I think there was over 2,500 bills. Okay, it's absurd, and I mean, we're all Republicans. We should be for less government, and that's absolutely not less government. But it's ideas, and everybody should have the ability to express their ideas. But there's a process to narrow those down. The first funnel is part of that process. That number goes from probably 2,500 to 700 or 800 now, because there's bills from last year that carry over that are still alive. So. It's a rat race to try to keep up with the bills on the committees that you're in, much less bills on committees you're not in, and it's almost impossible to keep up on bills that are on the other side of the chamber. So HSB, I have no idea what it is. I'll pass. I'll let my colleagues, maybe they have some experience with it, because I'm not even sure what the bill's about.
You want it?
Well, I'd like you to hear what you have to say on it too, but this is really very useful to submit the questions ahead of time, because what he is saying is very true. This is a bill that's been introduced just in the House. I don't think the Senate has it. And it gives us a chance to do a little bit of research if we need to also. So the question, I feel like, is perhaps has some misunderstanding about what the bill does. So let's first of all identify what it's doing, and then you can make a determination if it's good or bad. So first of all, just background. The Department of Natural Resources tests all kinds of waterways in Iowa, right? Lakes, rivers. And they then determine if they should put them on the impaired waters list, if they reach certain thresholds. Now, one of the things that they watch is the bacteria levels, right? Fecal matter type things that come into these waterways. And they put them, if they do reach a certain amount, they'll put them on what they call a 303 list and submit those to the EPA. Once they go on that list, then they have to determine, they have to follow basically what they call a total maximum daily load. So they have to develop a cleanup plan called TMDL. Is anybody familiar with that type of stuff? Okay, I'm in Fairfield, so yes, you guys are following this so much more closer than much of the rest of the state. I also learned, because of this question being submitted ahead of time, in Jefferson County, you guys have just one body of water that is on, it's not even on the 303 list. It's on the level that does not even have to be reported, but the DNR does have a list. It's sort of the kind of watch list, you could say. And that's a body of water just northeast of town here, which I find significant because in Mahaska County, I think I had 6. But you probably saw a press release or a news article, like I want to say it was last year sometime, that said 700 bodies of water were on the impaired waters list. Keep in mind that when you read something like that, understand what that actually means. And in my county, when I say there was about 6, it was 13 miles of South Skunk River, and then it was the next 22 miles of the South Skunk River. Those were 2 different listings of that 6. So just make sure you always ask the deeper questions. What does that really mean? What does that term define? And so that's just a mile from where I live, the South Skunk River. I overlook it, and I am well aware of potential. You know, we have lots of hog confinements. We have lots of things like that are going into the South Skunk River. And so anyway, the question. So what the bill would do is, if a waterway is identified and put on that list specifically for what do they call it? Fecal. Let me make sure I get that right for you. Fecal bacteria pollution. Then the DNR has to identify the source of that pollution. which I think is a great idea. If you know there's something there, why wouldn't you want to go and answer that question? Where is it coming from precisely? And so that's what that bill does. That's it. If it comes in high in that area, you ask the question, where's it coming from? And that requires further testing. And so.
Also, not to interrupt, but there's a Prius in the parking lot with the last numbers 399. Your headlights are on. Sorry. A Prius. So if you drive a Prius, your lights are on.
Yes, and again, more questions afterwards when we're done. Again, this is a conversation that it just doesn't require a one-way conversation. So Jeff, you go ahead and pitch in.
Well, thank you, Representative Hayes. That was a lot more thorough and competent than anything I was prepared to say. But no, so again, I don't know. To me, I just took a glance at it. It was unclear who's asking for this. I didn't see it in the Farm Bureau policy manual. So, I mean, the kind of way I approach this is, is someone going to come to me and ask me to vote in favor? If not, I'm likely to follow, to be obliged to your direction. So just stay in touch. I'll let you know what I hear, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, another drinking water question. So this is about the Iowa Water Quality Information System. Would you support this funding to continue? Oh, wait, I should tell you the funding. If we break it down, this means Iowa can fund the water sensor network for only 32 cents per Iowan. I don't know what that means, but would you support this funding to continue to go to the IIHR Hydro Science and Engineering at the University of Iowa, which is an independent program respected nationally for its scientific expertise?
Is there a bill number on it, or is it just a concept?
No. We go through the Senate, we go through the budgeting process at this point.
So it would be appropriations. Well, it sounds cheap, 32 cents, but that's roughly $1 million. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'd have to know more about it and what the benefits of it for $1 million of Iowa taxpayer money. Phrases like, or how it's phrased like that sounds like it's not much, 32 cents, but it's $1 million. So we spend in Iowa on water quality. I don't have the exact number, but last I read it was over $200 million when it's paired with local money and federal money for water quality issues. I mean, yeah, you're snickering, but that's the number. I mean, we spend a tremendous amount of money on water quality already. So this question often gets phrased like we don't do anything about it. The water quality in Iowa has improved drastically in the last couple of decades. It has probably there's the opportunity for it to get a lot better. I don't know anybody that does disagree with that. But phrasing the question often in a manner like we don't do anything about it, don't care about it, is a little bit disingenuous.
It's not how my question read, but that's.
Helena.
Yeah, so water. Yeah, one of the most important things we can have besides cheap energy, because countries need to be supported through cheap energy so that people can live and get the water that we're talking about here, because all of it is pumped to your house using energy. So you know what? We know that PFAS are not good for us. We know that drinking things in plastic are not good for us, even though I'm really thirsty and this water is hitting the spot. I personally prefer to drink water from reverse osmosis. That's not the question you're asking, but water is something that we can personally do something about in terms of putting systems in your own house, because even the water that is treated, that's coming from your water treatment plant, they're adding things into it. They're doing the best they can. They're following the EPA guidelines, which of course is all federal, and so was the stuff that I said about testing the waterways, and the state has to submit that stuff to the EPA. So there's a lot of federal things and state things happening here. And when you guys get down to the county level, there's even some things happening there too. So, personally, I would have to dig into that more too, but make this decision today that you drink water that is filtered really well through reverse osmosis and distilled. It's something you can do right now. So, Representative?
Thank you for the question. I think the question is yes, I will support the funding for the system. My recollection is this is the funding that was taken from Dr. Chris Jones and given to IDELs, right? So Little interesting backstory there. I think I got blamed for that. It was Senator Shipley, and somehow people didn't understand the difference. So I had nothing to do with that. But yes, I think we need the data. I think it's likely worth the investment. I'll never argue against collecting data and water monitoring. I'll let Dr. Chris Jones and Secretary Nag argue about, they can fight it out in this election on who manages and runs the program. I'll let them figure that out. But yes, I think data is good. I think it's worth the investment. And on Representative Helena's point, I attempted to donate a reverse osmosis filter to the Iowa Capitol for our office, and unfortunately the plumbing did not allow for the installation, but we did make an effort there.
Thank you.
Nice.
Okay. So there are 3 property tax proposals, the governor's, the House, and the Senate. What are the prospects of signing a final bill? And what are your priorities for the negotiations of the final bill?
Well, I said last year it was an embarrassment that we didn't get something signed. I mean, it was. We should have gotten something done last year. We didn't. And so if something doesn't happen this year, I'll be very upset about that. Part of the difficulty is there's 3 plans out there. Yeah, the House has got a plan, Senate's got a plan, Governor's got a plan. And last year, the 3 plans were very, very, very different in how they went about it. And so when you're trying to merge something that's, you got 3 different ideas and they're so far apart, to try to bring them down, because we all got to agree at something at some point. And trying to pick pieces from each one to get something that's effective and that everybody can like. That was a struggle last year. I think one of the plans, and I'm not going to go pick out, the Senate was so much better than the House or the Governor's, but one was giving a lot more credit, I guess you'd say, property tax credits to one segment, and I won't say who it is because I'm not picking on them, but you can say that it could be commercial, it could be residential, it could be multifamily, than others. And so this year, when you look at the 3 plans, they're all again very different, but I think they're much closer to each other's plans to start with. And I think that is going to help quite a bit with getting a final product out.
Very good, yes. So we've talked about 3 topics so far, and I was trying to find a website that I wanted you guys to have, but there's so much information out there that is available to you guys right now on your phone as you're sitting here. And one of them is iowawis.org, which is the water quality one that we're talking about. There's also, you can monitor nitrates, you can monitor phosphorus, everything in real time practically if you go check this stuff out. But regarding a question on taxes, Iowans for Tax Relief, they put together a fantastic column of the 3 bills that are out there on property taxes. Governor's bill, the Senate's bill, the House bill. They're all a little bit different. They all focus on, say, kind of going down a different path as we decide how to relieve the burden of property taxes that so many people come to us about. That's out there too, so that you can, the nice thing about this is you can sort of go through there and see, well, gee, I like this part of it here, and I don't agree with this over here in this bill and this over here. It's all in one place, Iowans for Tax Relief, and it's simplified. You can't go through all of these bills, and it takes you a long time to make sense of it, but they really break it down. So there's components that people like, there's components that people don't like. We are searching for the correct mix of that in the coming weeks, because we do want to provide property tax relief to people, because it's certainly been a priority and it continues to be. So check that out.
So not being on Ways and Means Committee, I haven't had too much of a front row seat, too much input in this discussion. I've just been kind of an observer trying to keep track of how complicated the property tax system is. I do know that our office, has seen a marked increase in volumes of calls and outreach, very concerned about this issue. I agree with Senator Dickey's assessment that this is an embarrassment to the state, but the drivers of our property taxes are going to be your local county and school boards, the taxing entities, and public hospitals and community colleges. There's other people who have a small piece of the levy as well. So I think my participation has mostly just been trying to work with local governments to find areas of redundant or unnecessary or obsolete spending. I think there is still a lot of work that can be done on this if we are willing and mature enough to have very honest, forthright conversations, and again, the flexibility to adapt, and to let go of things that are no longer working. If we don't have that flexibility, if we're going to be very rigid and stiff, then I think it's going to be probably more difficult than it needs to be. But so I think that's been kind of my approach. I think those conversations are going to be ongoing now into the foreseeable future, and I look forward in a local forum discussing what some of those ideas might be.
And I'll add one more thought. This is, I've said it many, many, many times, is easily the number one issue to get contact on, okay? Not even close. What's upsetting is the wrong word. What's part of what's wrong with that, and I have no problem with people complaining to me about our property taxes, but up in Des Moines, we don't really do anything with your property taxes. We're asked to fix the problem, but the problem's local. It's your cities, it's your counties, it's your school districts. That's who's raising your property taxes. We don't raise property taxes. We're trying to find Band-Aids or revamp current laws to restrict the growth and to control them and try to put some strength around them. I represent 5 counties, so I won't say what county it is, but multiple supervisors, multiple city administrators have shared this with me. We never hear anything from property taxes, and I believe them. When they have a budget meeting or they're talking about it, maybe 2 people show up. If the people that complain to me about property taxes would show up to the county supervisors or the city's planning or those meetings and express to me what they express, or express to them what they express to me, we probably wouldn't be in this problem. And I'm not being critical of anybody, but that's where this really, they got to start local on it, because that's where the property taxes are coming from. We're just being asked to kind of step in and try to fix a problem.
Yep, and I would just have to concur with him that if you really want to make changes, we've got supervisors in the room right now, know who they are, know their names, know how to go to those meetings and start talking to them. Because really what property tax relief is about is money in from your property taxes and money going out. And you could go through, guys, your budgets line by line and ask those hard questions of how are we actually spending our money? You guys manage and budget your own money. How is the county and the city managing and spending, which is actually your money also, your tax money? So go to those budget hearings and ask questions.
And schools as well. I mean,
for sure.
We got to put the schools in there too, and community colleges. I mean,
Yes,
when you look at your
yes,
property
thank
tax
you.
bill, where those are the entities that are using the property tax revenue. They need to be held accountable for that money.
Yep.
Okay, this question is in reference to the Foundry and the Title V operating permit with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. Question is, how are or could you be involved with our response to Iowa DNR and any other state and federal agencies?
Anybody want to take that one first?
Well, I saw the original question, and I appreciate for you slimming it down. The original question was a lot more, why aren't we doing something about enforcing air quality locally? That and I don't know who wrote the question, but the thought behind the question was, there's laws in place, federal, the Iowa DNR's, is the body in Iowa that enforces them, and so why don't we have somebody locally enforcing the air quality? Well, we just talked about property taxes. Do we want to hire somebody in Jefferson County that does nothing about other than air quality? I mean, you want to raise property taxes? I mean, that's the question. If it's that important, then start talking about we need to hire somebody internally at the county level to monitor air quality, because the thought was Iowa DNR is not doing it. I don't know that that's the case. I don't think the narrative of the question was completely sincere, because it was pointed towards the Iowa DNR is not enforcing the air quality standards that are in place. I don't know that's true at all, so I can't go down that path. There were some comments about statements in there about they've been in violation of all these air quality pollutants. I don't know that's true. Show me some evidence that that's the case. I'll make a call to the DNR and say, if that's the case, why hasn't something been done about it? Also in the question was, there was 200 and some people signed a petition asking the DNR to look into concerns. Okay, and it said in the email that the DNR's looking into those concerns and said they would have something back in April. Well, it sounds like to me the system's somewhat working. They're responding to your concerns. They're looking into it. You don't want to make rash decisions, and said they'll get back to you in the April timeframe. So ain't more than that. I don't have a lot more to add unless you want us to raise taxes and hire people locally to do what I think the federal government, the Iowa DNR, is currently in the process of looking at.
Yeah. So a mix, again, in this conversation of what's happened federally and what's happening on a state level. So these, the federal, or it's, what is it called? The Iowa Clean Air Act, that has to do with what the state is doing to comply with some federal regulations. And there's actually an interesting bill right now that I want to bring up that could perhaps address this. So as you guys know, we are elected, right? You guys go to the polls, you check those boxes, you elect your officials, and you also do that on a county level. But what happens oftentimes is that we know, we have that word floating around called the deep state, right? Who are those people? Those are the people that remain in the bureaucracy, in a hired position that make big decisions, but don't necessarily get the consequences of being elected. If you don't like your elected officials, well, then you just go and you can either run for office or you go vote for somebody else. But when it comes to the regulatory industry of the Department of Natural Resources, that is sort of the bureaucracy, right? So there's this bill right now that could address some of this because it would bring some of the decisions that the DNR and things like that are making under the oversight of elected officials, so that you have more direct, what I would say, just so you have some sort of an access to those decisions. So it is House File 2413, and it requires any major rule. So keep in mind that we pass laws, and then we go tell the Department of Natural Resources or the Department of Transportation, we say, okay, you guys are gonna make the rules to implement the law that we just passed. Well, sometimes in that conversation, things change and decisions are made that don't necessarily always follow the law, and there's a lot of leeway in there, right? So that particular bill would require anytime that there's a major rule, and I'll define that, what that means, but if a state agency makes a major rule, then it would have to be approved by the state legislature. And a major rule would be defined as one that costs at least $200,000 annually or $1 million over 5 years. A rule that has significant adverse economic effects. And then number 3, that you might be interested in, a rule that amends Iowa's Clean Air Act state implementation plan. So when they make a major change to that, a whole bunch of more eyes are going to be on it, and a whole bunch of more voices are going to be speaking into it. So that is one bill right now that could actually make a difference in what the regulatory agencies are doing in terms of making decisions right here in Jefferson County. So I just wanted to throw that out there so you were aware of it. And it has, I think, made it out of committee. I don't think you guys have it.
No, we don't have that. Who drafted that?
I'll look it up real quick. I don't remember.
That's right. I can look it later. But.
Yeah. Jim?
So thank you for the question. I think, if I recall, the question was essentially how can you best interact with the legislature through this process? I think it's a great question because it really does highlight the interest in economic development and employment and economic activity versus the external cost, in this case, the pollution of that. So that really is a great question for government to figure out is how do we weigh the cost benefit of this? And I think, so the first thing I can say is educate lawmakers, right? If this is something you're concerned about, let us know. Because I'll just flat out say I have very little experience with the Federal Clean Air Act or the corresponding state regulations. So it's a very new subject to me. So you need to educate us. You need to prompt us that, hey, this is something that needs your attention. If you have petition signatures, deliver them to us. Illustrate how many people care about the issue to help get our attention. And then, again, start asking some of these key questions. First of all, what is the state of Iowa authorized to do in this? If the DNR says, hey, we're bound, we can't exceed what the federal government outlines, is that true? And this is one of the unfortunate kind of, I think, institutional flaws that we have in America is the laws are so complex that even if you're competent enough to look up the federal statute that governs this, you might not be able to comprehend it, or you might not have the related context from related court rulings. So that's a big challenge that you got to say, okay, how much am I willing to pay an attorney that knows what they're talking about and can give me an accurate answer on what's possible here? It's sad, but true. And of course, typically the business entities that you're fighting against do have the money for that kind of legal know-how and skill. So I think those are very key questions. I think the last thing I'll point out is, these processes are in place, and if you want the legislature to take action, what you really need to do is demonstrate that that process is flawed in some way and kind of really highlight, what you think the problem is. And unfortunately, that can kind of only be done looking backwards. Okay, the Iowa DNR had this ruling, and this is why we're so upset about. This is the pollution, the damages that we're incurring. And so that's kind of been how these things have worked, is you let the process play itself out. And then you say, okay, the process is seriously flawed and it's harming Iowans, and then that could give the legislature an impetus to say draft legislation or discuss it. So that's kind of how the process works right now, for better or worse. Another avenue on this particular project, and again, this is recollection, so this might not be a truthful statement, but I'm like 75%. I think Fairfield Economic Development Association did play a part in attracting this business. So even, it's not just the legislature, you can plug in with other local decision makers, other local leaders, and say, hey, this is or isn't the type of industry that we want being brought into our town. So again, it's not just the legislature, but it's the consensus you build as a community throughout all the local, whether it is your Chamber of Commerce, FEDA, the local city council, all those voices really matter and play an input. And just to seal this point, like back when we were fighting the Utility Commission on smart meters, it was a resolution from the Fairfield City Council that, again, helped kick us in the pants to get something moving in the right direction there. So just keep those things in mind. It's just not the legislature. There's a lot of political actors that you want to influence to get where you want to go.
Okay, this is in regard to proposals that would criminalize library staff for allowing access to certain materials. How do you... Excuse me. How do you believe criminal penalties for providing access to books are consistent with free speech protections? And are you concerned about the effect this could have on constitutionally protected expression?
All right, so I'll kick this one out. So there's been two bills. A lot of legislators have weighed in on this topic, and the topic is now been discussed at local county boards. So I think even in Mason City, they had this issue. I think in Mahaska County, they recently had an issue that touched on this. So I think the specific question is misleading in quite a few ways. So I'll just try to explain what I believe is going on here. If I, as Jeff Shipley, provide an obscene material to a minor, that's a crime in the state of Iowa. If a librarian does that, it is not. So that's 728.7 is an exemption, that librarians are not held to the same criminal standard that other citizens would be. And so what Iowans have been asking for is, we don't think the libraries should be above the law. We think libraries should be on equal playing field with all other citizens in the state. And so what's happened in the last few years is, and the way I'm approaching this issue to my colleagues and now to the public is, in 2023, the state of Iowa set age-appropriate standards for what's acceptable for children in schools. And this is important because going back to the 1973 Supreme Court Miller decision, it's the contemporary community standards helps decide what is and isn't obscene. So what the legislature said is age-appropriate. Well, they defined what isn't age-appropriate, and they said it was containing sex acts. Sex acts, as described in Iowa Code 702.17, which you can read it. I won't describe what the sex acts say, but it's graphic. And the way I understand it from my plain reading of the statutes is I compare it kind of Playboy versus Penthouse. That if a school, if they gave their children a Playboy magazine that just tastefully, I'm not saying this is happening, this is an example, but if it's just a bare-breasted woman or a naked man leisurely enjoying themselves, that's totally acceptable. What's impermissible is when you get the graphic details of penetrative sex, oral sex, anal sex, and other, the code says ejaculatory functions. That's what's not allowed. So like a Penthouse magazine would not be allowed. So in my opinion, it's a pretty easy standard to adhere to. When we passed it in 2023, it is enjoined. It's not enforceable due to a legal ruling right now, but most school districts are in compliance, and most superintendents I talked to were happy to be in compliance. That they said, thank you for the guidance. Thank you for pointing out that these concerns are there. And like I said, they've been in compliance. Unfortunately, the librarians have not been so easy to work with. They have not agreed to adhere to age-appropriate standards as set forth in Iowa code. And further, this is what also kind of complicates the issue, is they'll say it's a parental supervision issue, which is correct, it is a parental supervision issue, but then librarians will also claim, in my opinion, very erroneously and absurdly, they'll also claim that state law prevents them from disclosing to a parent what a child checks out. So to me, it's, again, there's a lot of logical inconsistencies there that you can't simultaneously claim it's a parental supervision issue while also standing in the way between parents and their children's library records. And just as a natural fact, standing in between a parent and their child is one of the most dangerous places you can be in nature. And the laughter shows this is truthful. So for some reason, librarians have inserted themselves in that, in my opinion, very dangerous place. So there's a couple bills that have moved forward. There's other bills that have not moved forward. It is a little bit murky. For instance, and I know there's some librarians here, I've only heard, in my opinion, minor complaints related to the Fairfield Library. So complaints that I did not feel that were worth my time or the library's time to pursue further. There was a grassroots group that identified several holdings in the Fairfield Library. I looked at them, what they provided me, and I could see why there'd be some concern, but I didn't see it clearly falling beyond that age-appropriate standard that I described before. So thank you for the Fairfield Library for not causing me any unnecessary headaches. I'll put it that way. But yeah, sure, that does deserve a round of applause. Thank you for the library for hosting us and for all the good you do for our community. But again, I would just ask anyone, if you're a librarian who cares about this issue, if you would just simply agree to adhere to the same age-appropriate standards that we set forth in schools in 2023, the legislature would not need to discuss this issue at all. At all. So I hope I've helped make myself clear on that. This is an issue we've been discussing at least since 2022, and it does not look like the legislature is in a position to, well, we'll see what happens this session, but it's a tough one for the legislature to address, just given the nature of how complex obscenity law is. So.
I'd like to just address that too, because you are blessed today because you have the American Library Association president herself in your crowd. And so we welcome her. I want to make sure that
Well, I'm not here to speak. I'm here to just observe as an Iowan, but thank you for calling me out.
Yeah, well, it is a big deal. It is a big deal. The American Library Association, that's pretty significant. She has served for a year now.
Term, yes.
Okay. 2 years?
Thankfully, one.
Okay. And so what I'm pointing out is that you have somebody who knows this issue very, very well. And she's very intelligent and handles it well. The problem is we do have a conflict of ideas when it comes to how we protect children from sexually explicit material. And we're only talking about children here. We're talking about minors. We're not talking about adults that have all the rights that normal adults should have. I just want to bring up a couple of quick points because we could go all over the place on this topic. That libraries and educational institutions do have an exemption. Okay, like Representative Shipley mentioned, they are exempt from the obscenity laws in Iowa under Code Chapter 728, I believe. And one of the problems that we have found is that you guys are paying for this library. If you live in Jefferson County and you live in Fairfield, you are providing the funding for this library, which is a fantastic one, beautiful, by the way. You guys are paying for it. And it's an accredited library by the state of Iowa. The State Library of Iowa accredits about 350-ish libraries throughout the state. And in order to get accredited and to also receive some state funding, you have to check so many boxes off of this list. And one of them that is not mandatory is your collection policy, okay? And in that collection policy, to get accredited, one thing that we're struggling with is the fact that you have to follow certain American Library Association standards of intellectual freedom and things like that. And so you have what you have happening here is you want local control in this library, right? It's your library, you're paying for it. And yet you have, coming from the outside, from a national organization, certain kinds of standards that don't necessarily align with what you might believe to be appropriate for young, innocent, very easily influenced children. And so you have two things happening here, and this is a topic that, again, you're gonna have to dig deep on, because there's a lot to know when it comes to how do we accredit libraries? Who's funding them? How does the structure work? So when you go to your librarian and you do have want to file a complaint or something, who oversees that librarian? Is it the city council or is it the board? And there's a lot of confusion that I have found across communities that they don't know who that is. And so those are questions that you guys need to identify, because there is no direct, the library is supposed to be a city department, right? But there is no, typically the mayor will appoint the people on the board, and then the board hires and fires the librarian. And so there is no direct elected official there that you can address, okay? And that you could even hold accountable, all right? So you have the mayor appointing board members, but the board members are responsible for hiring and firing and overseeing your librarian. So you have a distance there between people like us that are elected officials and how they're being held accountable in the library. So I could go on and on about this topic. The goal here, though, is to protect children from sexualized material that damages them, that are harmful to them. And that's what parents are trying to do all across the state right now. That's what they're trying to do in Oskaloosa right now, and that's all they're asking. There is no book banning. Nobody wants to just ban books. Nobody wants to put librarians in jail. We don't want to squelch free speech, which, by the way, again, I could go on another bunny trail here. There was a recent it was down in Texas, I believe, case that did find that library collections, so all those books in there, are decisions that are considered government speech, and therefore they're not subject to free speech challenge. Okay, so that was just one of the recent cases down there that I have found very interesting. So when we talk about our First Amendment constitutional speech, I have it, you have it, all of you have it, but government speech itself, the books that are provided in the library, aren't necessarily free speech. And so they don't get the same types of protections that you do for your First Amendment rights. So that's enough on libraries. We'll go to the next question.
You want to weigh in, Adrian?
I think they covered it well.
Okay, so we've got a couple of questions that kind of work together, so we'll try to combine here a little bit. So House File 2310, which is in regard to funding pediatric cancer research at the University of Iowa. Excuse me. This is about thanking Jeff Shipley for managing it, but how do we get it to the finish line? And would you support partnering with the Gold Ribbon Mom and Dad Advisory Board, so legislators and researchers have a clear go-between, and Iowans can see exactly what these dollars are producing? And then an in general question, what is the state doing to decrease cancer rates? So an in general cancer question.
I'll lead off on the pediatric cancer issue. And so a little bit of background is a network of parents statewide who've been affected by pediatric cancer have formed, and they're asking for the state, and specifically the University of Iowa, to take the issue a lot more seriously. There has been a lot of conversation on cancer as a whole in the state, and it kind of distracts, as cancer is a very broad umbrella term that covers a lot of different illnesses across a lot of different people. I would argue that pediatric cancer is a magnitude more severe in terms of the suffering and impact to a family and community than other forms of cancer. So it is critical, and it's something that is an urgent thing that needs to be addressed. The couple things that really came out is the state of Nebraska has a very successful program that has allowed to pioneer and be a leader in pediatric cancer research. And also we had a very esteemed doctor who recently left the university for the state of Florida because of the funding that they're putting for pediatric cancer down there. So there is a lot of state compelling interest on why we'd want to address this problem. And the main thing is the University of Iowa as a research institution, I think, commands roughly $700 million in research funds right now. A lot of it comes from federal grants. And it was basically exposed, I wasn't in the meeting, but I sure heard about it, that the vice president of research there did not do a very good job interacting with the families and flat out said that this isn't a priority for the state, which was very upsetting when you watch the Hawkeyes play football on Saturday. You know, we do the wave to the pediatric patients there in the Stade Children's Family Hospital. And so, you know, if we're going to have that tradition in our Hawkeye football games, but we're not going to back that up with an investment, then that makes the whole state kind of look like a bunch of hypocrites. So I think that's an urgent issue. And so I've had some great conversations. I talked with Scott Cass, who's a gentleman from Northeast Iowa, this past week on strategies, and they are, again, assembling families who care about this issue, and they're pressing the legislature, and they're not going to rest until they get exactly what they want, which is kind of what it takes, is that dog-headed persistence to just you know, plow through and get your point across. And so what happened, when I talk about impacting other political actors, this gentleman was at the University of Iowa Dance Marathon a couple weekends ago and got on the stage and called out the University of Iowa from the Iowa Memorial Union on just the lack of action they were taking. And oh boy, that type of thing gets noticed. So when you're going to act bold that way, that's also kind of what it takes, is sometimes you have to be a little bold to get your point across. And as legislators, we're definitely hearing it. So we moved a bill out of the Higher Education Committee, and that'll be discussed before the Appropriations Committee. And I think there are a lot of ways to solve this that I'll be suggesting to my leadership, whether it is a state appropriation or whether it's a pass the hat advertisement type thing, you know, during Saturday football games. We do have a great history of generosity in this state. If you guys remember Carson King from a few years ago, he was basically able to parlay an internet meme into tens of thousands of dollars. It's pretty impressive what Iowans can do and how generous we are. Maybe we need a little checkoff box on our Iowa tax return to say, hey, you know, do you want to contribute to some sort of matching fund to get this going at the University of Iowa to make this much more of a priority? Because again, we do have children, and we need, also what was evidence is there really is a need for better treatment, especially on the pediatric cancer. So, you know, we've been talking about cancer for a long time. You know, I remember I attended my first breast cancer walk growing up after my grandmother passed away from breast cancer, and it just doesn't seem like we're making much progress on the issue. So we need to somehow figure out what's going on there and push forward, not just for better treatments, but ultimately preventions and God willing cures. So that's a project we're working on, and thankful for all the activists for pushing that forward, and thankful for all of those people in the audience who can help make this a reality as well.
Yeah, we all do have cancer stories. It's tough, I know. Cancer has affected all of us. We do know that Jefferson County has a very low rate of cancer. Okay, the lowest of all all the states, basically. So it does very, very well. You guys are doing something very right. When it comes to cancer, I just want to say, for me personally, I'm not taking anything off the table. Okay, when we are considering what could be causing all the various kinds, everything still has to stay there, okay? Including, I know, which gets a little more controversial, any pesticides and any chemicals that are being used, whether commercially or agriculturally. Just leave them on the table for discussion at least, because this is too important of an issue to not do that. So I just encourage everybody, there's another website I want to tell you about, Cancer Iowa. impaired.org, canceriowa.org, that's the Cancer Consortium. They've been working on this for quite a while. So just keep digging, keep asking questions.
Thank you. Again, that's a House file, but I have looked into that, brought it to my attention. Thank you. And from what I understand of it, I like the bill. We'll see where it comes through. I don't know, did it even have a bill in the Senate? It does not have I didn't think so. I looked after we talked. I'm not on HHS. I really wouldn't have any hand on it if it did. But from what I understand, I like that bill in the House. One thing I had, though, is, when we talk, it's just not on this issue, right? It's on any issue when we're looking at allocating more money. We have to also look at what we're currently doing and allocating money towards and see if it's being effective. Mm-hmm. Just throwing more money at it's not always the right solution, and that's on anything. Looking at what we're currently doing, is the money we're allocating, is that the best place for it? So that's the only thing I'd like to add to it. But
That's good.
Okay. This just says update on the casino bill, and I think this is in regards to Senator Dickey and the Washington Riverboat Foundation.
Well, thank you. If you received my newsletter or seen my comments in the newspaper in the last month or so, you understand where I'm at on this. So before, I've been a senator for 6 years, before I was ever even thought about running for office, I've done a lot of work with volunteer fire departments on fundraising, national efforts. And when you're our nonprofits, you're always looking for sources, right? Where can we apply? Because it's especially for, I'm not singling out fire departments, but that's my background, okay? A new fire pumper, plain Jane, nothing fancy, is $500,000, okay? Plain Jane. And that's not a ladder truck. I mean, it's just simple. A truck to haul the water is $300,000, okay? And I've been a volunteer firefighter at Packwood for 34 years. We talked about property taxes there, right? And our budget's about $30,000 a year, okay? The numbers really quickly, you understand there's no way they add up. So you have to look for outside sources, okay? So federal grants has been a source, other grants are a source, but we've got a major opportunity with the Washington County Riverboat Foundation. And that when the casinos system in Iowa was established 25, 30 years ago, it was, okay, how does Iowa, and again, this before any of us were ever there, but the idea was, how do we allow casinos to come into Iowa without having oversaturation, right? And you get so many get built, and then none of them succeed. So they looked at their granting licenses. Okay, the county has to apply for a license and get the license, and then the state then is going to control how many licenses based on where the demand is and how much support can be on a particular casino. Part of that agreement then is the casino has to give 3% of their revenues to the county. Okay, and then that county then identifies what they call a QSA, a Qualified Service Area, and they're going to take that 3% and donate that to that QSA to support nonprofit groups. Okay, it doesn't say it has to go out proportionally, but they're supporting this area. Also, the casinos then take 1% and send it to the state, that then breaks it up with the 84 counties in Iowa that don't have casinos. Okay, so spreading some of the love. Well, the problem is when they established this 25, 30 years ago, the ratios were absolutely flipped, should have been flipped. Okay. Because you're talking about 15 counties in Iowa have casinos. They get the property taxes of the casinos. They get all the jobs that come with the casinos. They get all the economic development around the casino. And they get the 3% that some QSOs or some of them are spreading the wealth around, but a lot of them aren't. And so back to what I was starting to talk about the fire departments, for years I understood this, the Washington County Riverboat Foundation, they've been very, 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 very stingy, is the nicest way I can say it, as to distributing the funds. And in 20 years, that Washington County Riverboat Foundation has had $78 million. They've went out and said I was slanderous and I'm not right on my facts. My numbers come from their website. And the other side of my information comes from the community foundations of Iowa that they have to support data to that takes the 1%, splits up the counties that don't have it. So if I'm wrong on my numbers, it's only because they lied on their numbers. $78 million have come through the Washington County Riverboat Foundation to go to nonprofits. 72 million of that has stayed in Washington County. Okay. Of the 5 million that hasn't, 1.4 million, I believe it was, has gone to Kickout County, 1.2 million to Johnson County, 1.3 million to Lynn County. Jefferson County's got a whole total of 30,000. And we laugh because it's insulting. Van Buren County, 0. Mahaska County, 0. Davis, Wapello, Appanoose. These are 18 county radius that they have established that they're going to support. And the idea is that's where their patrons are coming from. But they're not spreading the love back in return. Okay. So I've brought this up to the Casino Association for a long time. And they're like, no, we just want to keep the money ourselves because we want to supply, do projects all in Washington County. I have gone through the list and I found playgrounds that have been replaced twice with casino funds. Okay, I didn't know that playgrounds could be replaced that many times in 20 years. To me, it looks like they're looking for places to get rid of the money. When very valid applications from other communities outside of Washington County routinely get denied. Because as they've even said, read the article, their response letter to the other response of my newsletter, I think it was 2 weeks ago paper. We want to keep the money in Washington County. That was their quote. So, a bill I had introduced said that, and I drafted it because, again, if you're taking on casinos, that's a monster, okay? And that's a good way to kill any legislation is try to take on casinos. So the bill I drafted, I've been working on this for years, was just the opposite. It's a bill the way it's drafted, the casinos really get on board with. And it says that 3% needs to be split up with the counties in proportion that support the casino. And I don't want Big Brother in here. I don't want to have somebody walk in at the door that you have to show your ID to and monitor how much money you spend when you go on a casino floor, because that's Big Brother. I don't want that at all. But every casino's got what we call that players club, right? If you see it, you sign up and you get perks with it, but you give them your name, your information, everything, and you get this little card. And you go to the slot machine and you slam that card, and it keeps track of your winnings and your spending and all that. Well, they got all the information right there from that. Now, board games don't have that, but you can realistically assume that the percentages of people that maybe come from Jefferson County that use their player's card to play the slot machines would be the same percentage for board games. Using that information, you wipe out all the person's name and stuff. Just take they can identify the address and what county it resides from, okay? So they got all the information there. And simply says if 17% of the money that's spent in that casino comes from Jefferson County, then 17% of that 3% needs to go back to nonprofits in Jefferson County. And the casino should really love it because they're like, why wouldn't we want to send that money to the counties where our patrons come from? Because it's probably good publicity and drives them to come back to us. Right now we're sending it all and it's staying all right in Washington County, and there's some good with that for the casino probably, but it doesn't do much if Jefferson County patrons are saying, do I want to go to the Riverside Casino or do I want to go to Cedar Rapids, or maybe I want to go to Osceola? And you say Burlington, but now Washington bought Burlington, so it's the same owner. So that's the narrative of the bill. Unfortunately, it's funnel week, and that bill died this week. I knew when I introduced the bill, this is a long play. This is not a short fix. It's going to take years to get this. But the idea was to get eyes on the issue. I've had many talks with Washington County Riverboat Foundation on it. I would assume that they're going to change things internally just because of the amount of pressure they're starting to feel on this thing. But to change it has to be done legislatively, because they may be able to throw some money, county here, county there in the next couple of years and just sweep it under the rug. But it's a big issue. So I was passionate about it, but upset that it didn't meet the funnel, but figured that was probably going to be the case. So.
Okay. Two of our legislators need to dip out. We will let Miss Helena, because she doesn't have to. Jeff, do you want to have any last comments before you go?
Just thank you all for being here, and please stay in touch.
Nice summary.
Okay. Once again, we want to thank our sponsors, Morsi Law, Sierra Club, Jefferson County Farmers and Neighbor, and Freeman Cavanides Law Firm, the Fairfield Media Center, and of course the library for allowing us to use the space. We will see you here in a month. If you can submit your questions ahead of time, they can be prepared and then give you a real answer and be able to do this deep dive research, because if it's not in their committee, they may not know about it. We hope that you like the new format. We're hoping to try to get as many questions as we can. So thank you for coming. Have a wonderful Saturday, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Okay.